Nolan Rucci commits to Penn State football. Long time coming, overdue. So there was the prodigal wide receiver with Julian Fleming, Adam, and now there's the prodigal offensive tackle. Truly, because he has the family ties to Penn State. His parents are season ticket holders, but both he and his brother go off to Wisconsin. And I thought Nolan Rucci would have made sense in actually the last transfer portal cycle. And this is where James Franklin says that these relationships matter. Okay, so Penn State gets to right some of its wrongs by Julian Fleming and then Rucci. And of course, they've been done so well with the top prospect in Pennsylvania, Nicholas Singleton, Javen Williams, now Quentin Martin, and they're working aggressively to continue that trend try to continue the trend for 2025 and 2026. But when Wisconsin made a coaching change, it felt like Rucci was committed to Paul Chryst, former Wisconsin head coach. Paul Chryst is fired in the middle of a season, and Luke Fickell takes over, and that's a completely different. That's not that run first, run heavy offense, ground and pound. That's going to be turned into a spread, quicker pace type of offense. And so that connection that Rucci had just wasn't there anymore. And I commend him toughing it out, but I felt like this should have happened last year. It just happens a year a little later because he could have entered the transfer portal, but I think it shows the discipline and leader. Penn State is doing a different approach here, Adam. What do Julian Fleming and Nolan Rucci have in common? They're high character players. They're high character guys. They're disciplined. They're leaders. And I like the way that they don't quit on anything because Fleming had all of the reason to transfer out of Ohio State. I think Rucci had all of the reason to transfer out of Wisconsin, and they both come home. This is a homecoming for them, most importantly. But of course, this feels an absolute need because Penn State needed wide receivers. They still need wide receivers, and Penn State needed offensive line help, if you can believe that as well.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Zach. I think you look at these two guys. Once they entered the portal, I think everyone kind of looked all Penn State. They're two Pennsylvania guys, highly touted recruits. I mean, Julian Fleming on his signing day to Ohio State said, Penn State was the toughest school to say no to for him, and going to Ohio State, sticking it out there, now coming back home. And specifically with Rucci, I think you knew there was going to be some help needed, if the development wasn't there. And James Franklin's always been a big guy on depth in his offensive line room, having a lot of depth around his team, and losing a guy like Olu, who's going to be in the top 5 of the NFL draft and trying to fill that role, I think was going to be a big question this year. Nolan Rucci is a great get, a former 5-star recruit out to Wisconsin. You mentioned he went out there because it was an offensive line factory with Paul Chryst and how they were able to run the ball and pound it. Now with Luke Fickell, it's going to be a different focus for Wisconsin. He stuck it out 1 year, but now looking to come home to Penn State, which they've proven now with Olu that they can develop an offensive lineman and get him to the NFL at a high-touted pick. So I'm sure Rucci's looking at that saying, I want to be that next guy at Penn State. So I think this is a slam dunk get for the Nittany Lions, especially on that offensive line. Adds the depth. You mentioned high character guy, a Pennsylvania guy. He loves Penn State. He can't wait to get here. I think this is a huge get for the Nittany Lions. Both him and Fleming, who's coming as well, is going to be great and huge fits. These are needs for Penn State, and they'll go out and they address those needs right away. So credit for James Franklin after the lost Ole Miss, just going right back on it and addressing the needs they need in the portal to get ready for next season.
What this also tells me is that Penn State, they like the offensive linemen that they have, but to turn immediately to like Olu Fashanu is not the standard. He's an exception. You would like him to be the standard, but to go from somebody to basically be a redshirt freshman, come in as a second-year player and start and be as effective as you are, and then stay as long as you did, because he should have left in last year's draft cycle, but academics were very important to him. And now Penn State is in a similar position where that passing of the baton, the torch, goes to Javen Williams, but I didn't see Javen Williams in that Peach Bowl game. We saw Anthony Donko, who I was always told, and just watching some of his film, his highlight tapes, seeing how he was recruited, this guy's going to project as an interior offensive lineman, probably a guard, but never say no to center. And then he plays a majority of the reps at right tackle after Caden Wallace, and he's a true freshman. So of course, Javen Williams in the same class as well, but number 1 player in Pennsylvania, right? We've talked about this at the top of the show with Penn State. And I don't know, maybe there's something else. Penn State obviously is, and I can't assume injury or anything else, and I don't want to. That's not what this show's about. We're not TMZ for Penn State football and Penn State sports. However, it was intriguing to me that Donko went in at right tackle. I just think what this does, can Nolan Rucci start for Penn State next season? Because he certainly had his struggles at Wisconsin since he was a former top player out of a state. you would anticipate that he's in line to play left tackle or right tackle at Wisconsin, and he doesn't, or he isn't at least the face of that offensive line. He never became that. But can he become the face of Penn State's offensive line next season? I don't think so. I think that's JB Nelson. I don't think JB Nelson gets enough credit here. But do I like Rucci to compete at either spot? Because I don't think Drew Shelton is a lock to play that left tackle spot. There's Javen Williams. There's Anthony Donko now in the combination. The more into the fold, the more the merrier in this case. And Rucci's got to come in and learn as quickly as he can, because what all those players have up on him in the competition is they have been there. They've worked with Phil Troutwine, because I feel like in the case of Rucci, who's gone from Paul Chryst to Luke Fickell now to what Penn State likes to do, he's got to unlearn and learn some new things to be in that competition. So do I think he's going to be this 5-star takeover and be the next Olu Fashu in this case? No, let's be realistic about it. I think Drew Shelton starts at left tackle, but there's going to be a competition. And then right now, that right tackle side, I think that's your question mark. Anthony Donko, Javen Williams, and why Nolan Rucci was brought in. But what he does have over them is he is the veteran. He's played more college football. He's been in college football for a longer time. Not much, but some more. And I got to imagine the maturity level is a little higher than there as well. It's not a criticism of Donko and Williams. However, Rucci, I think if everything worked out at Wisconsin, could have been a captain just the way he carries himself.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Nolan Rucci's come in. I think James Franklin and Phil Troutwine got exactly what they wanted, and there's going to be competition this spring for those spots, and that's going to be so huge for this program, especially at that offensive line position. I think you look at Nolan Rucci coming in. He's been in a college weight room. I know that's a huge thing, just being in a college weight room, training as a college Division I offensive lineman with those Division I strength coaches is so important. I think that's something they'll have up on the 2, which will be redshirt freshmen for the Nittany Lions going into this year. Drew Shelton's a guy who played a little bit 2 years ago when Olu got hurt, played a lot this past season, rotating in with Caden Wallace and Olu at times on the offensive line. So I think he's one of those guys you expect to be a starter, but I would not be surprised. It's going to be an open competition. I don't think they're going to look at Drew Shelton and say, this is your spot and we're just at one spot competition. Completely open to see who's going to take the reins at both tackle spots. And I think it's going to be a great competition going into the spring. I think Nolan Rucci, as we mentioned, his character, his ability to come in, I think his willingness to learn, I think he'll really adapt and really be like a sponge for Phil Troutwine to get with him and really teach him everything they need him to do at the tackle position. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's a great get, and I think he's going to fit right into that room. And also, he's going to be a guy battling for that spot. I think will also be a great role model for Anthony Donko and Javen Williams. You look at them, bringing them up as well and being that role model for them, taking them with them. I think it's just going to be a huge get, and the room just gets so much better just with that personality in there with them.
Well, precisely that. You talk about Olu Fashion and Caden Wallace. For what it's worth, and Wallace has had due criticism over his years, but this was by far his best season. Yes. Penn State's offensive line, a little bit suspect in run blocking, downhill blocking, but when it came to pass pro, it felt like Drew Aller was under pressure at some times, but pass protection, it really allowed to create a pocket, and that starts with the 2 tackles anchoring each side so that Drew Aller's not rolling away to his non-dominant side. And Olu Fashion, of course, going to be a franchise left tackle and probably taken in the first 5 picks of the 2024 NFL draft. Olu Fashion and Caden Wallace are veterans. This is the key word here, veterans, experience. Nolan Rucci provides that. Penn State, the difference in this transfer portal, I know they've gotten guys like Arnold Ebiketie in the past, but you look to Mitchell Tinsley, Dante Cephas, who I feel like his name's a little toxic to Penn State fans at this point. I don't even know if I want to mention his name at this point. But my point being is that they've gone and gotten compliments from the group 5 level, and that just doesn't cut it anymore. Mitchell Tinsley performed well. Dante Cephas obviously wasn't that. But Penn State's got to go after players that are experienced in now what is Power 4 because of the elimination of the Pac-12, and they've done just that, and they still have more on the way. Nolan Rucci played Big Ten football for multiple years. Julian Fleming played Big Ten football for multiple years, and they got them both. Let's finish with this, Adam, because I'm curious to get your thoughts on what the offensive line ultimately projects to be. Sal Wormley, what decision could he make? Because I thought Penn State was in a position to lose 4 veteran offensive linemen. Well, Sal Wormley at least seems to be trending to come back, and they played him at center. I like the idea that Drew Shelton starts at left tackle. Right tackle is a big question mark. It's about how quickly can Nolan Rucci come in and play. So I'd say co-starters between any of them. Javen Williams, because he has all the potential in the world. Donko. It's tough to make a prediction. I'll give Rucci the nod just because he's coming in spring football and he has more experience. But Rucci on the right side, JB Nelson at left guard, Venga Ioane at right guard, and then at center, Sal Wormley. And this is, you really don't get, yes, you're losing a franchise left tackle, but there isn't a significant drop off with this new look offensive line. And then you have rotating in Anthony Donko and then Nick Dawkins, right? All these guys. And don't forget about Alex Birchmeyer. Don't forget about Chimney Ono, former 4-stars. So, and Javen Williams, all those guys are on the bench. So Penn State is in a really good spot when you were potentially losing 4 starters going into next season.
Yeah, I think, that's the big thing. Everyone thought like this year was the year because of what the O-line was going to be with Olu and all the veterans they have. I think now you're looking into 2024. And losing Olu is a big deal, but you have a group that I think James Franklin's going to be very confident in, especially with the rotation and the depth they'll have at the offensive line position where they can rotate guys, where they can maybe ride the hot hand on who's playing well at the time, make switches when they need to, do a lot of great things, keep guys fresh. I think it's going to be so good for them to have that. I agree with you on your starting 5. I think that's what I kind of look at for this team right now as well, moving Sal Wormley over to that center position to get Venga Ioane in that starting lineup as well. I thought JB Nelson, you said it a lot this year, and I've completely agreed with you, Zach, about how good he played for Penn State this season when he was healthy. And Drew Shelton and Nolan Rucci, just the veterans to bookend that offensive line, I think to start is going to be great. And all those youngsters rotating in, and Nick Dawkins, who's a veteran at the center position that was backing up Hunter Norzad this year. He can also move over to guard if needed. I think they just got so many guys that are so versatile as well, can move inside and out, that I think makes them such a dangerous offensive line, especially when you got both running backs coming back, the quarterback coming back. It's just going to be a great thing to have. Penn State's got a lot of talent come back on that offensive side. If they continue to hit the portal and really develop these guys they have in room right now, it's going to be a very dangerous offense in 2024.
And it's very important that Rucci and Fleming come in for the spring semester, not coming in late. I know different circumstances with Cephas, but it is important to build that chemistry now so that you're not playing catch up over the summer when people aren't on campus, right? I know they're football players. This is their job, but you get a head start on all of this, and chemistry, communication is so important, especially at any position. But offensive line for the 5 to have that synergy, whatever starting 5 you're going with, that is crucial. And that's why it is important to get a guy like Nolan Rucci, who's already disciplined as he is, to get him in on time rather than late.